Welcome back. If you've already watched the first couple of videos on the muscle and strength pyramid, then you'll know we've covered adherence and volume already. If you haven't, please go back and watch those first so that you can kind of see what I'm building off of here. But this next part is going to be all about progression. And progression just means making your training harder over time, right? If the goal is to build muscle and get stronger, then we really need to push the envelope. Like we're training hard in the gym, we're really pushing ourselves. But before I get into the specific sets and the numbers, like how many reps you should do, I need you to remember that these are just principles. They're not like straightforward rules that you have to follow. And a lot of people get hung up when we finally get to this step of the pyramid or maybe the previous step because they treat them like very strict rules. Like you have to train each muscle group twice per week or you need to do 10 to 20 sets per body part. But training really isn't that rigid. And these are just principles that guide us. They aren't a one size fits all type thing. So whatever you can personally recover from in training is going to be the answer. So your genetics are going to limit you in some ways, but be far superior to other people in other ways. So the key is just learning how to think through your own training, and that's where the actual results are going to come from. So please use these concepts as tools, not just strict rules. Um, but let's dive into it now. Let's actually talk about volume and progression. So I'm going to link a great site below that has kind of more of a visual, so you can go around and play with that whenever you like. But this is going to kind of show you some of the minimum effective volumes, the maximal recoverable volumes, and all that broken down by muscle group so that you can get a much better baseline. So when it comes to a baseline, here's what I tell everyone that trains with me. Just start with the minimum effective volume or the MEV that you're going to find on this site. So, like if it says 6 sets per week for chest, I want you to start there or even lower. That is the baseline, and you are definitely going to make progress with that number. It might not feel like the fastest progress you possibly could make, but we are going to ramp that up over time. So, there's no need to rush into it. And if you're brand new to training, I'm not joking at all. I really want you to do the lowest total amount possible. Any more than that is going to feel like you're running into a brick wall in like 4 months. And I promise you, you're going to burn out, have some kind of an injury or setback. I've trained thousands of people and I know that this is going to happen. So plan for the marathon, not the sprint, and you're going to be way better off. So these initial volume recommendations that you'll find on that site are 4 sets for chest, 10 sets for back, 8 for biceps, 6 for triceps, 8 for quads, 6 for hamstrings, 8 for calves, 8 for shoulders, and then anything else like abs and stuff is technically icing on the cake. So if we took all of those sets, averaged them out over 5 days in the gym, Monday through Friday, it would come out to about 12 sets per workout. And I've found over the years that this is pretty dang close to the perfect amount of hard sets per workout. And anything more than 16 to 18 sets in one workout really starts to lose quality quite quickly. Again, it's very personal, right? So your mileage may vary. But from these initial volume recommendations, it's just time to start your training. So that seems pretty obvious, I'm sure, especially that you've made it this far. But what you're going to want to do is get to the point where you just can't add any more weight to the bar and the only option is adding sets. So what do you do after you've done this much volume, right? Well, you don't just increase sets because you feel like it or you're bored. You only bump it up if you're truly not progressing anymore. And I don't mean like one bad week. I mean multiple where your lifts have completely stalled and your reps aren't going up. You're still recovering well, but you're not seeing any changes. That's going to be the key. You're not seeing any changes with these sets that you're doing here from these recommendations. So at that point, you could increase your sets by 1. And I just want to see the smallest adjustment necessary to move the needle in the right direction. And the biggest mistake that people make, like I mentioned before, is just doing too much way too soon. So they're going to jump to 20 sets per week for every muscle group and burn out in 3 weeks and wonder why they're not getting stronger because the website says, hey, the maximum recoverable is 20. I should do 20. Just be patient and let your body adapt. And if you can honestly say that 6 sets isn't enough, then you can go to 7. But don't just double it. Progression just doesn't always add more sets either. It could be doing more total repetitions. Like that still counts as progress if you're to do 9 reps instead of 8. So to make this concept a little bit more about how you can use progression by choosing a rep range, I'm going to go ahead and insert some footage of me going over a screen share with some of my old training data, and you'll kind of be able to get to see for yourself what that looks like when we take a very simple progression scheme and apply that to an actual training log. So we're going to go 8 reps and then 9 reps and then 10 reps, increase the weight. Then we're going to go back to 8 reps, then 9 reps, then 10 reps, and increase the weight. And there's no need for me to just add an extra set of an exercise, or for me to say, no, there's no way I could lift heavier than that. I need to reiterate to you again that if you are capable of doing all of the sets to the prescribed repetition range and you're able to do it, you are capable. You can go up in weight. You don't need to be afraid. I think most of the time it's just a mental barrier for people. And if your training log says I did 160 pounds 10 times, 10 times, and 10 times, then it's time for you to try 165 pounds. And eventually you'll be able to do that 10 times and 10 times and 10 times. And then once you can do that, you go to 170. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. And that strategy is going to last you for months, if not years, until you get so advanced that you have to add more complicated strategies into it. So be patient, just trust the process. And this is kind of some of the starting progression that I went through. So I think it's very good to look at this as a beginner yourself and kind of see how I like to do a bit of the bookkeeping here when it comes to progression. So I like to color code my stuff here in the simple sheet that you might also see in the training templates. But here we've got exercises that just use an 8 repetition load in red, and then a 12 repetition in this kind of orange color. And then blue is going to be 10, then 8, then 6. So it's a little bit of a more complicated style of progression. So I'm not going to touch on that one right now. But in general, I just really want you to get this idea of progression down by just starting at the base of a rep range. So say in this case, I've decided that 8 is the end of my repetition range and 10 is going to be the top. So on this machine bench press, I'm doing 150 pounds, 8 times, 8 times, and then 8 times on that third set. Now, none of these were to true failure, which I denote with an asterisk. So if this last set was to true failure, I would just put a little asterisk like this. But I know that I was very capable of doing 150 pounds. So now, the next week, instead of just going to 155 or 160, I'm just going to try to add another rep. So I go to 150, and I do it for 9, and I do it for 9, and I do it for 9 again. Now in week 3, we go to 150, then I do it for 10, 10, and 10. Still, things are moving pretty dang well, right? Still going great. Now, I've matched the top of my rep range. 10 was the limit that I set for myself. That's just going to be my arbitrary number, but it's going to give me a goal. So now I'm going to go to 160, and I'm going to start that whole process over again. And I go 8. So I go 160, and I get 8, 8, and 8. And now what happens in week 5? I go to 160. I get it for 9. I get it for 9 again. And then I only get it for 6.5. Now, I didn't put an asterisk here, but it would be very interesting to kind of go back in time and see what Tristan was feeling on this day. Like, was that 6.5 because I just tapped out and it wasn't really true failure and that's why I put it that way and I didn't put a star? Or maybe was it back in time when I just wasn't really using the star as my go-to? That could very well be the case. But Needless to say, I know that that load should still be trying to get to 9 because I wasn't able to get it to 9 last time. So in week 6, we try again and we go 160 and we do hit it for 9, 9, and 9. So that progression is going to last for a very, very long time as a beginner to early intermediate lifter. And it might last you 6 months, it might last you a year, 2 years, even 3 or 4 years if everything is all on track, all these variables. So you can see everything here is slowly creeping up, right? We've got that 140, 9, 9, and 9, 140, 10, 10, and 10. And then we go to 150, 8, 8, 8, 150, 9, 9, and 7. And then here, what's interesting to note is we go 150 by 10, then we get to 7, similar to the way we did it here. But 7 is not in our rep range, right? Like we wanted to start at 8. And so here, I like to denote it with a colon, and then notice I dropped the weight here to go down to 140 instead of 150 for that final set. And that's a strategy that you can use if you just think that your performance is not really there. But I would urge you that you don't need to be adding sets to your program unless your performance just is not improving at all and that plateaus for weeks at a time. Okay. So if you see, for example, this 160 come up and you're stuck at 160 by 10, 10, and 10, and when you go up to 170, you are not even close to approaching the next rep range because you're just so fatigued, or your just recovering capacity isn't there. Then you could consider something like a deload or adding sets or changing things around a little bit and maybe not training so close to failure. But those are the last things that you should be doing. There's nothing really creative here that needs to be done. You just need to slowly and steadily add more weight to the bar than you did last time. And I really want to stress this idea that just because you're capable of doing it, you can do more. It's always going to feel hard, no matter what. It never gets easier. So if you are successfully able to do 160 by 10 by 10 by 10, like we see here, then the next time I want you to put 165 pounds on the bar, or maybe even 161 if you have micro plates, and start lifting heavier. It's always just a little bit heavier outside of any outstanding circumstances, right? We've covered deloads a little bit in the course so far, so these shouldn't be a shocker. I have always personally liked my deloads to come on the 7th week. That's when I know I'm starting to feel pretty beat up and pretty tired, and so I slash these numbers down by just a little bit, right? You can see I intentionally dropped it by 30. I took a set off the end as well, so I only did 2 sets, and I dropped the weight on most things. That'll keep me fresh and ready to go when I start over again. So now I bring it right back. If this is week 7, when I go back to week 1, I'm not starting with these numbers over here anymore because these are the baby weights. That's where we started. We're going to go ahead and start right here or right here. We're going to make a judgment call and say, hey, these weren't all the way to failure. I'm going to go 160, and I'm going to go ahead and restart my training block here. If I get 160 by 10 by 10 by 10, that means it's time to go up again, 165 by 8 by 8 by 8. And that process will constantly make you improve. It's really that simple. Doesn't need to be more complicated. And the only time you'd ever really want to add sets is if you were, say, training a smaller muscle group like a lateral cable, where you feel like we did 15, got up to 14, got up to 20s, but the 20s are just way too heavy for that small muscle group. At that point, we could consider, hey, maybe rather than jump all the way from 15 to 20 pounds, we just add in a 4th set at 15 pounds. The most minor increase in sets you possibly can do. I cannot iterate that enough.